It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, I'm up to you. How are you? I mean, I was feeling in the championship mood yesterday. Was talking about the Golden State Warrior championship parade in San Francisco. They had celebrated the previous three in Oakland. And this is the first one in San Francisco, but this is where it all began, right? When I was just like knee high, going to see Rick Barry play at the Civic Auditorium, to see Wilt Chamberlain way back in the early. I dragged my dad. I said, we got to go see these guys, these really tall guys play basketball. And it was in the Civic Auditorium in the city. They call it the city. So it was good that the Warriors were there in the city, although a lot of people would say, hey, the heart and soul of the Warriors, really, the championship heart and soul, was formed in Oakland, which I can't argue with that. I mean, I didn't even know where in 75, I'm not even sure where they played in 75, because when they won in 75 with the Rick Barry team, I was in Boston, and I remember where I was. They won 4 straight against the Washington Bullets. I was rooting my dang head off. I was so happy for that team, and because the Warriors had always been losers. And then they went on to be losers for many, many years after that, until Steph Curry came along and boom. Now, 4 times in 8 years. It's great. It's great, the Warriors. So I don't have a Warrior. I have one Steph Curry t-shirt that I can't find. It has a Filipino sun on. And so I put up my San Francisco Giant t-shirt on my trusty sidekick here, Kulindong Gong. Kulindong Gong is his name. Built for October, a reminder that even though the Giants lost last night to Atlanta by a run, and they should have won that game. There are so many games that the Giants, are going through a season. It's a long season, 162 games, but last night's game with Logan Webb's pitching, they should have won. They had a chance, 2 chances at least, to win in the 8th and 9th inning. I said inning and winning. I combined it. They had 2 chances. They couldn't do it. And then the Braves got him in the bottom of the 9th with a walk-off. So, hey, it's a long season. And you start watching baseball in September. That's when it's good. And then October, it's great. That's why Built for October is an apt slogan. And let's hope that the Giants are. The Warriors, just to show you what a long season basketball season is, they begin the season in October and then play all the way into the middle of June, if all goes well, right? If they win everything and they go through the playoffs as well as the main season. But just one thought about the Warriors before we go on to our topics of the day. I want to talk about Ruby Freeman and the January 6 hearings. I want to talk about Robin Tran, a trans comedian who's making the scene, that you can find her stuff on that David Letterman special on Netflix. And I want to use Robin Tran as an example to talk about Vincent Chin Day. Vincent Chin Day, day 3, okay? That's the thing we're starting up here. This is like the 2nd year we've done it. I've been talking about having a 5-day kind of meditation for Vincent Chin for at least 8 years. And last year we did it a little bit here on this show when I was doing this show. But in this season, I just think it just makes sense because it's the 40th anniversary of the beating of Vincent Chin, which ultimately led to his death. This would have been day 3. There were 5 days. I'll explain that when we talk about it. in a sec. But all that's coming up on this show. The Emil Guillermo micro talk show it's for everyone. But I tend to talk about Asian American issues because most people don't see the Asian American in American issues. But there are. I mean, there are Asian American BIPOC aspects of every issue that you see, although you don't see anyone commenting on it. But when, an Asian American reads the news or sees the news, there are aspects of that story that aren't told in the story that impact Asian Americans. So we talk about it because we're here, we matter, we care. And if we don't speak out and say, this is how we belong, this is where we belong, this is how it pertains to us, then we are invisible. Then we don't show up. And we want to avoid that, right? So I say this is the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs, the AAP, the Asian American Pacific Islander, or the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, or the AAX, another naming convention for Asian American X, you name your ethnicity. Marianas Islander, well, AAMI, I guess. Hey, welcome to it. Or AAAS, the Asian American Samoan? Yeah, sure. The Islanders are part of this, although the PI in the AAPI includes the Islanders, but not the Native Hawaiians. The Native Hawaiians want their own NH. So we're all bickering about how we represent our umbrella that's in our Mai Tai. Because there's 25 million of us if you count everyone, the mixed race, and 25 million in a country that's 300 million. You can see where, if you're going to go micro, the importance of reaching out and seeing us in everyone, seeing us in the whole big thing. And we are. And the best example is that Ruby Freeman thing, January 6 hearings, which we'll talk about. But before I do, because there's so much to talk about, right? I mean, I think people are still coming down off the high of that Warrior Parade, the Warrior Championship Parade. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, I'm sick of the Warriors." Or you can't be sick of the Warriors. You can't. They're an underdog team. It just so happens they've got the best run outfit, and they've got a lot of money. The owners of the Warriors bought that team 10 years ago for $450 million, which is now an absolute steal because that team is worth 10 times that. $450 million, if my math serves me correctly, is that $4.5 billion? That's a lot of money. $4.5 billion. And Joe Lacob, he's a billionaire, according to Forbes magazine. But he's he's like number 1,200 or something like that. He's not even like a top billionaire. But he brought together people like Peter Guber, the movie producer, and they're the owners. And I guess that's kind of the operative word, the owners. They were there sitting at the front of the stage, beginning of the parade yesterday. And they said, Peter Guber said, "We want a sequel," which some people would say, that is extremely, extremely greedy, Mr. Guber. But in fact, it's not. It's just totally capitalistic, right? Why wouldn't you want more success? Why wouldn't you want to pay all these great players that you have the money they deserve, the money that is owed them because of their extraordinary talents? Why wouldn't you want to do that unless you believe in the basic capitalist mentality which justified slavery more than 400 years ago? And that is to say, the whole idea of, well, business costs money, but if we get free labor, we can build our profits. And isn't it ironic that on the celebration of Juneteenth, the celebration of America's awareness that throughout the entire country, slavery was abolished and black men and women were free. I mean, that was not a universal thing, apparently, in 1865, because for 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, they carried on slavery in Texas. That's like Republicans holding on to the big lie. You know what I mean? I mean, Republicans saying, oh, well, yeah, Trump won. I mean, Biden stole it. I mean, it's exactly like the big lie. And so here was the parade yesterday celebrating, honoring Juneteenth, when the U.S. Army had to go to Galveston and say, hey, Texans, slavery's over. You're living a fantasy. And that's Juneteenth, right? That's the celebration where America becomes one in the idea that, yeah, we don't rip off blacks for their labor by calling them slaves and getting their labor cheap and free. Not cheap, free. We don't do that anymore. They're free men. They're free. And from 1865 to today, right? Slavery is the stain on our nation. And on the day, the second year, we celebrate Juneteenth and this awareness. How great is it that the celebration comes during the Warrior Parade? Because there really is, I don't think there was a national celebration. There was like a lot of little celebrations all throughout, Saturday and Sunday, and Monday was the official holiday where you got the day off. If you had a woke business owner or boss who said, yeah, we got to follow the federal holidays. But my God, how significant is it that on this day that we celebrate how we celebrate how we recognize as a country that getting free black labor, slavery, was racist as hell and no longer legal. On that day, we celebrate essentially an all African American team and their excellence, winning 4 championships in 8 years with a total payroll into the hundreds of millions. I mean, Stephen Curry, his average salary is like $52 million a year on his max contract. $52 million a year. And when you see Steph Curry holding his cigar on that bus in the parade and like trying to keep it lit and looking like a mogul, holding his 2 trophies. This is the evolution of America and the evolution of American labor. I mean, it's kind of, wow. Look, I know these are exceptional, talented championship ball players, but what it means and what it has come to mean is the players and the owners have a certain kind of parity. When you've got to pay out millions of dollars to these stars, you essentially have empowered them so much that they have status of ownership. I mean, this is what makes Michael Jordan. It's what makes Magic Johnson. And in this generation, it's Stephen Curry and all the people on the Warriors. I mean, at some point, you make so much money that you start looking at, I'm going to buy a franchise. I'm going to play the mogul game, because they are moguls. And who should be moguls? Who should be the owners? But other African American players who have been enriched by the game now taking over the front offices. It's not happening fast enough. But in basketball, it has happened. And so I just thought it was really delicious to see that yesterday. And now they're talking about, well, can the Warriors afford to keep this team together? They're going to have to pay like a $300-400 million luxury tax on top of another $300 million, $400 million in salary. I mean, who knows what the negotiations are going to be. But if Steph Curry's making $53 million on average per year, Andrew Wiggins at $35 million, he's due for an extension. Well, you don't mind paying Andrew Wiggins a little more, you know? I mean, he was the second best player on the team, and he deserves it after everyone sort of said, Andrew Wiggins, he can't play. I mean, the Warriors took his big salary and thought, oh, this is going to be a deal. Because when he gets his head right and starts playing well, boom. And the Warriors have younger players like Jonathan Kuminga and Jordan Poole. And, oh, man, the Warriors and those rookies who aren't playing, they make millions of dollars already. Jordan Poole found himself after 3 years trying to find himself. This year, he found himself. He's going to make, as Jordan Poole puts it to Andrew Wiggins in a video that's being circulated that they took on Thursday in the locker room, you're going to get a bag, and I'm going to get a bag, and that bag is going to be full of the Warriors got it. Like I said, that team is worth billions. Billions. They can afford it. And this is how the New York Yankees of basketball, how they're born, right? They got the money. They have the attendance. They got the arena. They have, you know, all the rights from broadcasts and whatnot. They got the merch. They can afford to pay their players. And I just hope they keep this team together. Because the one thing that I said yesterday that they mentioned that made me think, oh, this is what makes the Warriors different. They kept talking about family. They kept talking about how it's Steve Kerr likes to talk about family and love. And how do you keep a team like that together? Family and love. And, you know, you look at all the assistant coaches who stay on, or the players who stay on as, you know, player development. Sean Livingston, Leandro Barbosa, I saw up there on the stage. I think this is the difference with the Warriors. And this is why they should be America's team. They should be America's team in basketball, right? Just like the Dallas Cowboys are sometimes viewed as America's team in football. But they've got the most entertaining player right now, Stephen Curry. They were an underdog, decimated by injuries 2 years ago, like the worst record 2 years ago. They come back, they almost make the playoffs. They weren't in the playoffs last year. And then they come on this year and they win it all. This is a humble team that's built on cash. They got the money. So good luck to the Warriors. And like I said, it's symbolic because June 19th, or yesterday when the parade was on, June 20th, was the official celebration of Juneteenth. And for lack of one big parade, my God, what a day in San Francisco to see all those people on Market Street. Just like when the Giants had their parade in 2014, last time it was there. And I saw one shot that showed the great big picture of, say, from a bus looking down Market Street, so you can see up toward Twin Peaks. And it's an amazing view. It was a sea of people. I don't know exactly how many people, but 100,000, maybe more. I don't want to lowball the Warriors, but my God, what a symbol to celebrate the Warriors, a team of multimillionaires most of whom are African American, on the day the nation celebrates the end of slavery in America, which is in essence, the total white privilege, right? The white privilege of free black labor to enable one's racist capitalism. That's what it is. They call it what it is, right? The one reason why people love slavery is not because they hated black people. Southern whites loved slavery because it was cheap labor that enriched them, that made them rich. You get the cheap labor, you go to the bank, it gives you cover against claims of capitalism, or claims of racism, excuse me. But capitalism is racist, ultimately, right? But I think that's really why it was kind of an exciting day yesterday. And you know what? Everyone on that team deserves to be paid. Even the scrubs. Juan Toscano Anderson. I even hope Chris Chioza gets paid. And Nemanja Bjelica. I think he's the only white guy on the team. I hope he gets paid. But the Warriors, this vintage Warriors, a great everyman team. Really. I mean, just not the greatest Warrior team. No KD, but they overcame, they persevered, they won. All right, so that was I saw the residual coverage of the Warriors parade. He had to comment at least a little bit more on them today. But yesterday also, continuing on, the coincidence of Vincent Chin, the 40th anniversary of his beating was June 19th, 1982, right? Detroit, specifically Highland Park. Ronald Liebens takes a bat and clubs Vincent Chin. Vincent Chin goes to the hospital. He's there on the 19th. He's there on the 20th. This is the 21st. This is the third day. And I've always said we need to take these 5 days just to honor what Vincent Chin means to us. It's a way to say, you know, Vincent Chin, I mentioned this to Dan Gonzalez. If you listen to Friday's show, I said, he's the father of Asian American activism. And he disagreed with me. He said, well, maybe he's an accelerant. I mean, there are other people. I mean, I don't know what his views were. Look, Vincent Chin was a kid celebrating his upcoming wedding at a strip club. Does that sound like the father of Asian American activism? No, perhaps. But maybe I meant, and, Dan was, he jumped all over me on that. But I said, look, you cannot deny that his death, the event of his death, made people stand up and take notice and say, what is happening to our community? What are we doing? How can this happen in America? And I know subsequent to 1982, people have come up and said, that was the year. 1980, Vincent Chin, his case, that was the year when my activism came alive. I mean, a number of people throughout the country, people of a certain age, they look back and say, yeah, that was a time I decided to devote my life to working for the community. And so when I proposed we take these 5 days when Vincent Chin fought for his life and was kept on life support, I really wanted to take the time to think about, well, where are we now? What is our community all about? And you think about it, look at how our community has grown. I mean, our community has gone from just a small number. I mean, maybe what, under 4 million? Now we're about 24 million just in the last 40 years. Think about how there's a new generation still. We're wondering, Vincent Chin, I'm just trying to figure out who Simu Liu is. Oh, he's Asian Canadian, by the way. I no knock on Simu. I love Simu, but I mean, people are seeing Asian Americans crop up, Crazy Rich Asians, Shang-Chi, you know, they see BTS and they say, hey, what do you mean there's an Asian American problem? We've had Asian American problems, Asian American issues. And you see people on the news as victims getting killed, getting accosted, assaulted. More than 11,000 hate instances during the COVID era, according to Stop AAPI Hate, which, all right, these are self-reported numbers. But it's dangerous out there right now for Asian Americans. Since Asian Americans were scapegoated by the former president with, you know, pandemic slurs like China virus, 11,000. This is where we are now. As far as I'm concerned, that's 11,000 Vincent Chins. And this is on the 40th anniversary of Chin's beating and death. So it's time to think about that. Time to think about what that means. How we have not progressed nearly as quickly, as fast, nor as far as we think. Not when there's still issues about whether we truly belong, whether we're truly American. And I say this as an Asian American born here. My father was the immigrant. He was actually colonized and came here. But I was born here. And why is it that I, as a born here, no doubt about it, American person, American citizen, can be viewed by some as, are you really an American, Emil? I mean, just on first glance. But you know what happens. It happens to this day. Something to think about. Day 3 of our time thinking about the beating and death of Vincent Chin 40 years later. It's a way to look at the state of Asian America. You know, that those 11,000 who've been killed and beaten and, you know, experienced transgressions during the pandemic. They've made the headlines, and yet how many people have forgotten? You tell people about Atlanta, you tell people about the 6 spa workers in Atlanta, and they'll still scratch their head. You tell people about Vincent Chin. How many people, when you mention Vincent Chin by name, still will scratch their head and say, oh, what are you talking about, Emil? They don't know. I did a story time the other day. And you can see it on, go to emilguillermo.media on Facebook, go to the story time show, and then go fast forward to the end. And toward the end, I tell a little 10-minute story about Vincent Chin. Some people who saw that came up to me later and said, you know, Emil, I didn't know. These are people who should have known too. So I didn't know anything about Vincent Chin. They don't talk about it. Yeah, they don't. Because we don't know this history. We don't know our history. Because it's our history of a white American, Ronald Ebens, who bashed the head in of Vincent Chin, forcing Chin to go to the hospital for 5 days, during which he never recovered. Ebens was put to trial, and first of all, on the actual crime, Ebens and his stepson Nitz were allowed to plea bargain to second-degree murder, given 3 years probation, and fined $3,720. That's it. That's all they got. That was the state murder prosecution. So then came the first federal civil rights case, or court case, and that ended in a 25-year guilty sentence for Ebens. But then he appealed that and won an appeal. He was acquitted. So Ebens has never served any time for being the killer of Vincent Chin. Ebens has also avoided the civil penalties. He lost a civil judgment where a judge said, you owe the family $1.5 million. The family has seen nothing. Nothing. And we think about that because clearly the Vincent Chin story is like, it's like Juneteenth, the story of delayed justice. Although they did ultimately get justice in the African American community, but the Asian Americans still waiting, at least civilly, for a sense of justice, for the Vincent Chin estate to be made whole. And this is probably one of the most discouraging things about this story, that the laws favored Ronald Ebens to skirt his responsibilities and the accountability that was ordered by a civil judge. He was ordered to pay $1.5 million. He pled poverty. He took advantage of the law and took advantage of Asian Americans. It's the saddest thing about the case. We think about it. That's why day 3. Think about how hard it is still to get justice, and how that's just, is it just the way it is? Or do we try to do our best to, well, we certainly, we persevere. We don't give up. And if we need a positive, let me point out, David Letterman does a show called That's My Time. It's on Netflix. It was part of the Netflix as a Joke series. It was a festival, and they did a number of shows in theaters, one of which was David Letterman doing short 20-minute shows called That's My Time. David Letterman gets up, does a monologue, introduces a comedian. They do some panel at the end, interview, end of show. It's a quick show, about 20 minutes total, no commercials. But check out the episode with comedian Robin Tran, T-R-A-N. Robin Tran was, she was funny. She was trans. Has nothing to do with her name. She didn't do it for the pun. But if you want to think of a positive in this day and age, is that there are young Asian Americans who are living their lives and not being afraid and not standing down, but standing up, literally in the case of Tran, and being who they are and risking a lot in the process, because one of the things about trans people that I know from just from people I know who are trans, I mean, you worry about them all the time because they hate the amount of hate that people feel toward trans people. It's important that we stand up and stand with our trans brothers and sisters. And as you know, I know maybe you don't know, but there are a lot of Asian American trans people out there. They deserve our support. And I think Robin Tran does it in a positive way, does it with a sense of humor that will catch you off guard, but you will see that it's kind of a thing that we need. It's a modern Asian American look at life. It's not the 50s version, the 60s version, not the 70s, not the 80s, not the 90s. This is a 2020 version of Asian America. And I applaud Robin Tran. Funny, gifted comedian. Catch her on that Letterman special. It's called That's My Time, David Letterman. It's the episode with Robin Tran. Catch it on Netflix, please. And just use it as that indicator that, you know, for everything that makes us feel depressed because of Vincent Chin, here's a reason to feel positive. When you see an Asian American trans comedian stand up, be funny on Netflix, and it's normal. We can do this. It's normal. So we'll be back tomorrow with more about Vincent Chin. Tomorrow will be day 4. Can you imagine day 3? You know, the news is getting out about this Asian American, this Chinese American man who was beaten. He's in the hospital. He's hanging for his life. Can you imagine the news? I remember as a young reporter in San Francisco, I saw the headlines, but you know, I was in San Francisco. We weren't covering that story. But tomorrow I'll talk about what day 4 may have been like as we considered Vincent Chin's life on life support and how much longer. That tomorrow when we continue our commemoration of Vincent Chin 40 years after the beating and after the death. So now I want to talk about really the big story of the day, and they put it on here in the Pacific time zone. It was on in the morning and lasted till about noon, and that was the January 6 hearings. It was hearing number 4. If you missed it, you know, here's the thing. I can understand why people say, look, I've seen it, I got it, I can't be convinced. I'm already convinced that Trump his actions were criminal. I mean, if you're like that, then I guess you don't have to see it. The people who have to see it are the people who remain in the fold. remain in the grasp of Donald Trump and the GOP, who insist that Donald Trump won in November of 2020. That's the big lie. And there are still people who believe in that. Why? There is no reason to believe that Donald Trump won. And if you followed it the first time, when all the things in Georgia were unveiled, in real time, then about the Secretary of State, and how what Trump did to try to put pressure on them in Georgia, and how they stood up to Trump and said, no, there are no dead people. They said, no, there's no, my duties to the Constitution, not an allegiance to a Republican president. And these are Republicans in office. They had 3 Republicans, Raffensperger, Sterling on the Georgia part, and then they had Rusty Bowers, the Republican who was the Speaker of the House of the Arizona State Legislature. I liked him the best because I hadn't heard of him. I heard of Raffensperger and Gabe Sterling before, and they were good today. But I'd heard that story where Trump says, I need, I need these votes. I need 100 and how many thousand votes he needed. Well, he said, you got to find these votes for me. And he put pressure on them. And the Georgia guys, they were good. They stood tall. They stood tall to Trump. But Rusty Bowers, he was not in Georgia. He was in Arizona. And he was even better than both of them. And all of them had Giuliani and others really putting pressure on them to, hey, do me a favor. Come on, do the right thing for Trump, not do the right thing for the country. And fortunately, these Republicans did the right thing for the country, did the right thing for the Constitution. And that's why it is important to see this. If you have lost faith that there are any good Republicans left in America, there are a handful. It's not just Liz Cheney and Liz Cheney isn't the only one, and her other Republican counterpart on the bipartisan committee. They brought up some decent Republicans, and if you missed the hearing and you watch Rudy Bowers, you see how it impacted his life, and you see how he stood tall. And to the person, Rudy Bowers and Raffensperger and Sterling, they all were asked by Chairman Thompson. They were all asked, you wanted Donald Trump to win, right? Yeah, I'm a Republican. Of course I did. They asked him point blank. And they all said to the person, yeah, we wanted Donald Trump to win, but we didn't want him to cheat. We wanted to play fair and square, and we wanted to be democratic. We wanted to play by the rules of our democracy. We are under the Constitution. Those are some good Republicans. I mean, sometimes it's easy to cast, a general statement, all Republicans are bad, blah, blah, blah. No, there's some good ones. There are not many of them, but these were the good ones. These are the ones who really, if you believe, as I do, that our republic hung on a thread, then as now, we've lasted this long because of Rusty Bowers, because of Raffensperger, because of Sterling in Georgia, but Bowers in Arizona. Because had they given in and followed Giuliani, followed all these other folks who have either not testified or have pled the fifth. I mean, Steve Bannon has ignored the January 6th committee. But other people have taken the fifth. People like Michael Flynn taken the fifth. Why? Because they don't want to incriminate themselves. Yeah, because they participated in the conspiracy. Ultimately, we might get to some kind of criminal thing where then the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has to act. But I think you need to know this to know who the good guys or who the bad guys are in American democracy. And now Donald Trump has almost played a character in Goodfellas to try to get Republicans to lie about the election, to lie about either dead people voting or about fake ballots cast or some kind of fraudulent activity that never happened, that never took place. That's why you got to watch these hearings. But now, if you're going to watch one person, you definitely have to watch Ruby Freeman. You got to watch Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shay. What's her name? Shay Morris? God, my notes. Shay. Miss Shay. Wait. Ruby Freeman's daughter, right? She's the one you got to watch. She's live. And she talks about her life and how her life was destroyed because of charges made against her mom, Ruby Freeman, an African American who was she was just a voter activist, right? She was a small businesswoman known as Lady Ruby. Lady Ruby had on a shirt on election day about, proudly proclaiming that she was Lady Ruby. It's election day 2020. And what happened that day, she says, has wrecked her because of the lie. The lie that was perpetrated. Oh, I think I stopped the music. Good. I wanted to stop the music. I did. Oh no, let the orchestra take 5. But here's the thing about Ruby Freeman again. Ruby Freeman, you see guys like Rusty Bowers and they're white and it's like they're the white and the privileged, and it's nothing for them. They went through a lot too. Rusty Bowers said that they were protested against. People stopped them from working with the barrage, thousands of phone calls, thousands of emails. But they managed to weather this. But for an African American person like Ruby Freeman and her daughter, they were essentially bullied. They were essentially threatened in our democracy. That's the thing that just bothered me when I saw how, Lady Ruby or Ruby Freeman's testimony. I was just amazed at how it impacted her life.
Now I won't even introduce myself by my name anymore. I get nervous when I bump into someone I know in the grocery store who says my name. I'm worried about who's listening. I get nervous when I have to give my name for food orders. I'm always concerned of who's around me. I've lost my name and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security. All because a group of people starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
You hear someone say that, even though she was sitting down beside her daughter live, but this is played from a tape. You see that, and you see how powerful a little pressure from the president and his henchmen are when you are a mom and pop small business person, maybe just mom, forget about pop. You're doing your Ruby's pop ups, clothing, fashions, and you're an activist for democracy, just getting the vote out. You see how stifling it is when no less than the president of the United States comes after you, and how it just impacts your life. Now, Ruby referred to her daughter Shay, and Shay worked as an election worker for 10 years. It got so bad she had to quit her job. Here's Shay.
He's turned my life upside down. I no longer give out my business card. I don't transfer calls. I don't want anyone knowing my name. I don't want to go anywhere with my mom because she might yell my name out over the grocery aisle or something. I don't go to the grocery store at all. I haven't been anywhere at all. I gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way, in every way, all because of lies.
Because of lies. I mean, this is the thing that I don't think people understand is, the big lie, the Trump won. That's the big lie. And then they laugh it off and say, you Democrats are full of it. But there are consequences because in trying to prove the big lie, who did the Trump folks, who did Trump and Giuliani lean on? They leaned on these officials. And I don't mean to belittle what happened to them. Some of them were threatened. Some of them, had, they were sent demeaning emails and voicemails. But as I said, they're in a position to withstand a lot of this because of their position. But a woman who works as an election worker, falsely accused of doing something that cost the election, a woman who sells pop-up fashions, who's an activist identified by Trump as a vote scammer. I'm telling you, this is when you say, Emil, I know you're trying, this is, how significant is this? Well, this is a kind of violence toward innocent Americans, and it could be any of us. And this is the kind of fascistic action that shuts people down, destroys lives, and you can hear it in the voice of Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay. It's just, I mean, it was the only part of this testimony that really that got me emotional. Because, this could be any of us. I mean, and I'm not talking about, high flying executive or high flying politician, or, of course, that if you're a politician, you'd be in the crosshairs anyway. But it could be anyone who some people might deem, we can railroad this guy. We can take this guy for a ride. He's got no deep pockets. He won't be able to fight us. we'll be able to buy his silence. We'll be able to destroy him. That's how it works. That's the bullying, autocratic, fascistic tendency of these kind of campaigns, especially when something is at stake like the presidency of the United States. So to me, those were the lessons from day 4, that there are some still good Republicans out there who did not take the bait, did not say, yeah, Trump, anything you want. We're doing it for you. We're loyal to you. We're buddies. Yeah. No, that's wrong. We're buddies to the Constitution. And this, once again, is what happens when you elect someone who clearly has no sense of public policy or public service and only sees office, political life, as an extension of business. You know, he sees, and when people start saying, well, we want a politician who runs the country like a business. No, we don't, because this is not a business. This is not a business where the way business people think is they want profits, they want growth. Screw the people. They want profits, they want growth. They don't care about the little people. They don't care about any people aside from their own pockets. Government in a democracy has to care about everyone, not just profits, not just growth. And that's why when people say, we want government to be run like a business. No, you don't. No, you don't. That is not a government I want to, I don't want to live in a country where the government has that belief. We want a government to be run well. We want a government not to be corrupt. We want a government to be either balanced or working on behalf of its people. But we don't want a government that is so hell-bent on profits that it forgets its people. And that really is a difference. So there are, and if there's some difference about that, well, this is why you have votes. This is why you put things to a vote in a democracy and say, hey, well, what do we want here? What kind of policies do we want? What kind of benefits do you want to give to people who are indigent and poor? Anything? Oh, we just want them to live in the street? Okay, yeah, well, let's vote on that. That's how democracy works. It doesn't work where we're going to cut things to the bone to hurt our people. And if you say, well, Emil, that sounds like the kind of government we have now. Well, that's because we have a divided government. We don't have any one party that is so far ahead that you can do the kind of things that it needs to be done. So we end up with compromises, or we end up not doing things that need to be done. So there was that idea of, that you can still be a good Republican in this day and age, because we saw good examples in Bowers, Raffensperger, and Sterling. We also showed that Donald Trump really wanted people to play the loyalty card. Thank goodness these people didn't. And the final lesson is where it really broadens out to all the rest of us, and that is the power of the presidency. When he wants something, he'll lie and he'll blame you, like they blamed Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay. And if you're going to see one thing from day 4, see that. See the first part with Bowers, because he's good. You can skip the Georgians. They're good, but you may have seen them in previous stories. And then see Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay at the end. And then you'll have a complete sense of day 4. Day 5 comes up on Thursday, I believe, and they are going to talk about, let's see what they say. They're going to talk about I think they're going to talk about the fake electors, although they talked about them a little bit today. But I think it's very compelling stuff. If you're already convinced that Trump is a crook and should be, that there should be criminal charges or should be held to pay, well, that makes it more nebulous. Held to pay sounds like, well, we're going to give him a hard time, but we're not going to like bring him up on charges. Interesting though, Liz Cheney at the end did suggest that, well, Pat Cipollini, the White House attorney, he may have to come up and show how he was trying to be a good Republican when he tried to prevent Trump from doing some of the things that he did on January 6th. So far, as Cheney pointed out, there's some people who did not show up. Like I said, Michael Flynn, Attorney Michael Flynn did not. He took the fifth. Steve Bannon hasn't shown up. And they're hoping to get more witnesses to come forward to take part. But it also just shows you that it's probably more effective when they show regular people like Ruby Freeman. When they show Ruby Freeman, they say, hey, look, this is like all the rest of us. We can be targeted. This is what to fear in a democracy that is losing its way, because they will target ordinary people, regular people. And that is not part of a democracy I want to be in. Not my democracy. All right, so that's our program for today. You know, one thing I heard Shay, Ruby Freeman's daughter, talk about how just her life has been turned upside down. She had, she gained 60 pounds, which is, my God, that's a lot. And I'm just trying to look at one thing here. I think that she so far is like the common person star. Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay, both of them together, because they're the kind of people this democracy is built on. I'm talking about, like, if you're an Asian American, you're a poll worker, or an Asian worker, you work in elections and you volunteer every year. Because what happened when Trump came down hard on these people, a lot of people quit. And a lot of people got scared. And a lot of people gave up on democracy, which is the unintended, but maybe really what they intended all along, to make people doubt and critical of our democracy, because we are now at that stage when people say, well, we are hanging on a thread in terms of our democracy. Yeah, we're at that stage now. I wish we weren't, because when you see things like the other day, the Texas GOP saying, yeah, the Trump 2020 election was stolen from him. Still to this day, they believe that. That is not an encouraging sign. Okay, so That's it for our show today. Uh, Regular listeners of the show know that I like to close with a little loving self-kindness meditation because it's important. You know, I heard someone talk about how they were worried that their kid has no empathy. And they were worried that their kid likes to go to YouTube and watch videos from these white guys talking about stuff. And I thought, oh, I better tell this person about my show. I'm like the antidote to all that stuff. And, you know, the kid's person of color. I don't necessarily think this show is for kids, but I mean, you know, it's not that complicated. It's about life. But I was going to tell her that, yeah, you should have your son watch this show. Because if I'm whining, I don't think I'm whining. Some people may think I am, but if I'm whining from a totally different perspective. And like I said, I'm the antidote to all those other right-wing, fascist, proud boy type of things out there. And I'm not particularly woke. I like to think just smarter than the average bear. But that, you know, but not necessarily woke. But I know there are people out there who are feeling like they want to give up. And they get frustrated. And then now the recession's coming on. Hang in there. Hang in there. And I was going to suggest to this person that, all right, if you don't want to listen to my show, then all you got to do is meditate. All you got to do is come to the last 2 minutes of the show. Follow your breath. And do as Thich Nhat Hanh. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. See space. Breathe out. Feel freedom. Space. Free. Space. Free. Tends to just enlarge your scope so you know that you're not really, as I am right now, in a closet. No, you're not in a closet. You're in a much bigger space because you focused and are presently aware and get that sense. A little meditation goes a long way. You only need about maybe 10 minutes a day. 10. And it builds up cumulatively. Sort of like, you know, doing a little bicep pump. And then once you get presently aware, I like to do a little loving kindness meditation, which is how I end the show every day. Where I say, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here, back again tomorrow. Don't forget, catch us on amok.com, the replay. Catch us on Facebook, emilguillermo.media. Catch us on YouTube, on Twitter, @Emil Amok. Till next time. Mahal